Exclusive contracted novel by Feilu Novel Network. Great Qin. Integrating Tsar templates to forge the Sun God Dynasty, Heng crossed the Great Qin and fused the League of Legends to become one of the strongest Desert Emperor templates, becoming the third son of Ying Zheng, Ying Ziheng. Born on the same day, the vision caused a sensation in the 7 countries and was hailed as the birth of the Eastern Emperor. However, more than a decade has passed without showing any talent, and it has been forgotten by the world. Until Jing Ke assassinated Qin and wanted to repeat that humiliating scene, Ying Ziheng alone killed the great master Jing Ke, causing a sensation in the court and the public. He even volunteered to conquer the capital of Yan in 5 days and captured and killed Wang and Crown Prince Dan. Just as the world felt arrogant, an endless sandstorm came and turned into a natural disaster. The Sand Army, which was thousands of miles away and immortal, revived and slaughtered the world. The 7 countries and 100 families of scholars all crawled and trembled under his shadow. Power is the best portrayal of an emperor. The world is like a desert, and I am like an oasis. Collect gold from the 7 kingdoms, forge the supreme sun disk, embark on the path of ascension, and forge the Immortal Sun God Dynasty. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. The Eastern Emperor descends, the third Prince of Qin. Seeking. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. In the 20th year of the reign of King Qin, autumn. The autumn wind rustles and all things are in decline, but the capital of Qin, Xianyang, is full of joy. Last year in World War I, Qin conquered the state of Zhao, and the joy had not yet dissipated. However, amidst the relaxed and lively atmosphere within the city of Xianyang, there is a black palace that exudes a sense of solemnity. That is the core of all power in the state of Qin, where the Qin royal government is located. Inside Zhongtai Palace, dozens of cold stone pillars stand tall, supporting this grand palace. There are countless divine and mysterious birds carved on it, like lacquer and ink, between the wings stretched out, a few black bird feathers shake off, it seems like the next moment is about to soar and soar in the 9 heavens. Although today is no different from an ordinary morning, there is a relaxed atmosphere lingering at this moment. Although there was no words around, there was a hint of joy on the faces of the courtiers. Just because a big event happened today, Yan Kingdom, envoys worship Qin. Qin conquered the state of Zhao, and General Wang followed suit and marched northward, heading towards the direction of Yan. Nowadays, Yan's envoy is clearly showing weakness. Perhaps soon, Yan's state will also become a part of the Great Qin. Achieve the magnificent hegemony of the Great Qin's unification of the world. King, Lin. A soft voice sounded, and there was an instant silence in the Zhongtai Palace. Step on the sound of footsteps echoed from within the Zhongtai Palace, subtle yet clear. At this moment, let alone inside the palace, all the hustle and bustle of the outside world seems to be isolated from the outside. In the cold and serious hall, the courtiers stood still. On top of it, a majestic figure sat in a black king's robe. The East Sea pearl curtain hanging from the Mian crown covered half of her face, making it difficult to see her expression clearly at this moment. Even bloodthirsty and murderous fugitives would tremble with fear in this cold and solemn atmosphere. Yesterday, the envoy of Yan's state arrived in Qin. Finally, a majestic voice broke the silence. This morning, the court is going to receive envoys from the Yan state. At this moment, King Ying Zheng of Qin has made a statement, obviously to mention this matter. The courtiers remained silent, waiting for the majestic voice to follow. The envoy of Yan is going to present the head of the rebellious General Fan Yuqi and the map of the important territory of Yan, Governor Kong. The majestic voice of King Ying Zheng of Qin was once again heard, and his words were astonishing. The courtiers all know the disgust and hatred of the Qin Wangjing towards the traitor in front of him. When Fan Yuqi defected, Ying Zheng executed countless of his clans. Even if he escapes from the state of Yan, he still offers a heavy reward for his life. Now that Fan Yuqi has been slaughtered, there is no need to say much about his great joy. And another map of Dukong is even more important, as Dukong is the most prosperous place in Yen. If there were this map, it would be effortless for the Great Qin Iron Cavalry to step on and destroy the Yen kingdom. These two things alone have already shown enough sincerity. The horse steps on the capital of Yen, just around the corner. For a moment, the serious atmosphere in Zhangtai Palace had cleared up. Even King Ying Zheng of Qin was still feeling relaxed and happy at this moment. Suddenly, my gaze stopped on the figure of a golden silk robe not far away. Ziheng did come today. In Ying Zheng's voice, there was a hint of strangeness. As soon as these words were spoken, the palace of Zhangtai fell silent again. Among the courtiers, someone's gaze cast upon the figure in the golden silk robe, revealing the same strangeness. Ying Ziheng's face remained unchanged, and he arched his hand in response, saying, "National affairs are naturally indispensable." Although the words were spoken, the tone remained indifferent. Ying Zheng's gaze scanning Ziheng's entire body, eventually retracting his gaze and sighing inwardly. Ying Ziheng is his third son, and he is honored as the third prince of the Great Qin. At birth, there are frequent strange phenomena, first surrounded by endless smoke and clouds, and then swept by the majestic purple air. Afterwards, 2 days rose up at the same time, towering above the vast sky, shining endlessly. At the moment of complete birth, there seemed to be 2 virtual shadows condensing within the 2 days, transformed into 2 illusory suns, sliding and falling into the Xianying Palace. Afterwards, a loud cry was heard. It is said that when he was born, the golden light lingered around him. When he was completely born, the entire hall of golden light converged into a bright and radiant Haori ring, converging around Ying Ziheng. Like the arrival of a golden crow, the terrifying radiance spreads everywhere. As if in the mythology of Chu songs, the supreme Eastern Emperor descended a miracle. The radiance of Haori lasted for a day and a night, and then gradually dissipated and became introverted. Even Emperor Ying Zheng, who has witnessed such a phenomenon for thousands of years, was deeply moved. Ying Zheng's eyes were blazing as he gazed at the Kalinzi whispering in his mouth. On the same day, shining brightly throughout the world. You can call it Ziheng for Ying Ziheng, who was born with such a mysterious vision. Ying Zheng naturally had a fondness for him. But it can be treated like a unicorn, and has been infused with countless efforts since childhood. However, Ying Ziheng seemed as if nothing had happened and continued to stand calmly. However, the courtiers around saw it with equal regret. Although this Kalinzi was born with great momentum, he disappeared from the crowd and showed no outstanding performance. Many courtiers on the side also withdrew their gaze. When this Kalinzi was born, he was given a lot of hard work, and even for a period of time, half of the courtiers in the court were sent to teach Ying Ziheng. However, its performance is mediocre and has nothing to praise. And many generals on the side also had strange expressions. Because it is Kalinzi, who is favored by Ying Zheng, in addition to learning the essentials of governing a country, he is also taught by many martial arts experts. And those who are like ghosts and gods on the battlefield, many generals who fought fiercely were defeated and failed to make any progress in teaching Ying Ziheng. Not to mention being a martial arts powerhouse, after some twists and turns, Ying Ziheng was barely able to reach the level of an ordinary person. Over the past decade, it's not possible. Woo, that's it. Even in terms of dealing with people and things, it's far less than the benevolent, righteous, and courteous young master of Fusu. Closed-door reading all day long, indifferent to worldly affairs. Now even Ying Zheng, after many disappointments, has given up on this former Qilin son. Ying Zheng's gaze swept around Ying Ziheng, while the other young masters all nodded and lowered their brows, afraid to look at him. Only when his gaze was fixed on the young master Fusu did he receive his elegant and peaceful gaze in response. In the depths of that gaze, Ying Zheng saw a lingering worry and pity. But what they are worried about is not the future of the Great Qin, what they pity is not the soldiers of the Great Qin who died in battle. What he was worried about was the fear of Qin launching another war, and the fear of Qin launching another battle to annihilate Yen. What he pities are the soldiers of other countries who fought fiercely against the soldiers of the Great Qin, and the 6 countries that the soldiers of the Great Qin fought fiercely against. Grand Prince of Qin, Fushu, the future heir of Qin, is actually showing mercy to other countries. Under these gazes, Ying Zheng's heart was filled with even more sorrow. This kind of temperament, to put it nicely, is indecisive, ugly to say, it's just being pedantic and weak. Ah! Ying Zheng sighed in his heart. Among many young masters, they are all mediocre, as the eldest young master, Fushu, although somewhat timid and discerning. However, it was deeply influenced by Confucianism and advocated the so-called morality of benevolence, righteousness, and righteousness. Such behavior is naturally supported by the people. Now the Great Qin is on a great journey to unify the world. What is needed is not a benevolent ruler, but someone who can wield a sword and open up new territories. And the third young master Ying Ziheng, who was once equally expected, also disappeared from the crowd. The only commendable gesture is its calm and composed demeanor. But how can we take control of the worship of Qin in this way? Ying Zheng's heart was bleak. Even though he unifies the world and creates a prosperous empire, how can he rest assured that there is no successor who can carry on the past and open up the future? Feeling the helplessness and regret in Ying Zheng's gaze. In Ying Zi's perseverance, there was a calm and even playful atmosphere. In the 20th year of the reign of King Qin, 227 BC, he was an envoy of the state of Yan. On a map a lot of information made him understand that soon something interesting will happen. P.S. Newcomers and new books, seeking support. Chapter 2. Sword Saint Fear, Jing Ke Assassins Qin. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. Qin General Wang Jian broke through Zhao, captured Zhao Wang, and collected all his land, advanced to the northern border and reached the southern border of Yan. The Crown Prince Dan was afraid and invited Jing Qin to assassinate the King of Qin. Jing Ke assassinated King Qin. In later historical books, there are only a few records of what will happen in the Zhongtai Palace today. However, the danger is not something that can be summarized in just a few words. Even as an eternal emperor, he still loses his former demeanor in the face of life and death. Walk around the pillar, stumbling and running away. Ying Ziheng's gaze swept over the high platform, and the figure of King Qin Ying Zheng sat on it. The overall momentum is grand and majestic, as if it coincides with the sharp intent of the Great Qin sweeping across the 6 countries at this moment. With each breath, it forms its own momentum and has already taken on the posture of a timeless emperor. However, this posture will soon be panicked when facing Jing Ke, with a sword wrapped around the pillar. Jing Ke is a swordsman in the martial arts world who is difficult to make history, but he left a significant mark on historical knowledge due to his bold assassination of the Qin king, and even became known as a generation of heroes. On the other hand, Ying Zheng, even though he narrowly survived, left behind the term, King of Qin bypassing the pillar, in later generations. Today's incident can be regarded as a bit of ink in the grand path of Emperor Ying Zheng's reign for thousands of years, and can be considered as a dark history. How could the King of Qin, who aspired to unify the world, bear this humiliation? Even if Jing Ke dies, it is still difficult to vent his anger. In a fit of anger, a king's order was to move out, and the Great Qin Iron, like Wang Yang, rode horses and stepped on the capital of Yan. Completely opened the grand prelude to the unification of the Great Qin dynasty. However, now that Ying Ziheng is facing the posture of Emperor Ying Zheng, he understands that there may be some discrepancies in the historical records. Qin King Ying Zheng's anger towards the state of Yan after being assassinated and his angry deployment of troops was just an excuse. How could such an ancient emperor-like figure make an act of ambition just to lose his composure for a moment? I think it's just to become famous and find an excuse. However, the incident of Jing Ke's assassination of Qin may have also made Ying Zheng understand that the 6 states did not die from the downfall of Qin. This further strengthened Ying Zheng's ambition to unify the world and achieve the unification of the empire. For this cheap father king, even Ying Ziheng has gained more recognition. And as his gaze passed by Ying Zheng's side, he saw a white-clad swordsman standing quietly beside him. Ying Ziheng's gaze showed a hint of strangeness. The descendant of the Ghost Valley Sword Saint, Gainye. At this moment, Gainye is standing quietly next to Prince Zheng of Qin. As a generation of swordsmen with unparalleled combat power, it is understandable to serve as the personal guard of Ying Zheng. The power of the Sword Saint stands above people. The 100-step flying sword is unparalleled in both vertical and horizontal movements, capable of sealing the throat upon seeing blood. However, even in the face of the Qin Iron Cavalry, such terrifying forces still need to be weighed. Allowing him to have unparalleled combat power and be able to fight against 100 enemies and 1,000 enemies and 10,000 enemies, is it possible to use one enemy country? I think this is also one of the reasons why Gainye was willing to serve as a guard with Ying Zheng. Although that is the case, even if a generation of swordsmen are on the battlefield, it is difficult to determine the winner. However, there is infinite terror within reach. There was a generation of Sword Saint by his side, but Jing Ke forced Ying Zheng to bare his sword and flee around the pillar. At this moment, Ying Ziheng's heart lit up with a cold smile. His gaze fell on Gainye, and his expression was icy cold and clear. Is it precisely because Jing Ke's combat power has already become extraordinary and his terrifying power is even more above the concept, that he has not made a phone call? Or is it that Gainye hesitated in his heart and Jing Ke assassinated Qin thinking about the near future? Gainye will betray the Great Qin and even kill countless soldiers of the Great Qin with his sword. Ying Ziheng's eyes were even colder. Opening and closing his teeth, he whispered, "Empire, there's no need for traitors." At this moment, the ending of the generation of Sword Saint Gainye has already been settled in the eyes of Ying Ziheng. Gainye closed his eyes and rested on the side, suddenly feeling a surge of heart and blood. A chill surged in my heart, as if a terrifying beast was staring at me. This kind of terrifying meaning has not been seen for a long time. In an instant, he seemed to return to his youth, when practicing in the Ghost Valley Gate and fighting against terrifying birds and beasts in the deep mountains. There is a great terror between life and death. Who? Gainye's eyes opened in awe, as if there was a supernatural flow of light, his gaze sweeping under the main hall. The sword intent surged on his body, almost losing control, to the point where Zhao Gao and others beside him looked sideways. Zhao Gao's eyelids remained low, half open. I could only see half of the king's chair where Ying Zheng was sitting, but Yu Guang swept past the Sword Saint on the side. But Ying Zheng remained unmoved by this, and the rest of the crowd naturally dared not speak much. Gainye noticed his loss of composure, randomly calmed his own breath, and remained silent. Just now, what happened? Gainye was puzzled. That killing intent dissipated in an instant, as if it didn't exist at all. But as a swordsman of his generation, he naturally believed that it was not his own illusion. Someone must have had a murderous intent on me just now, and that person's strength is enough to threaten my life. Now I have achieved the position of Sword Saint, with extraordinary combat power. Who would be such a strong person who makes oneself feel palpitated? Gainye's gaze swept over the courtiers in the Zhangtai Palace, with a focus on many generals. Is it Zhang Han? No, it's not. Is it Zhao Gao? No, it's not either. Can you say it's Meng Tian? No, it's not him either. Gainye's undisclosed gaze also attracted many gazes. At this moment, the generals led by Meng Tian raised their heads to meet the gaze of Gainye, several hidden gazes from the shadows cast over. However, upon seeing Ying Zheng's still indifferent expression, he withdrew his gaze. Suddenly, Gainye's gaze paused. A figure dressed in a golden silk robe caught the eye. Sangongzi. Gainye murmured in his heart. A mysterious feeling arises from it. And the next moment, Ying Ziheng also noticed Gainye's gaze and looked up at him. Two gazes crossed the void and touched each other. In just an instant, Gain seemed to suffer infinite terror. Subconsciously mobilizing the sword intent within the body, instinctively wanting to make a reaction, however, the once majestic sword intent remained unmoved like a stubborn stone. Finally, under this terrifying gaze, I don't know how long it has been. Gain just realized that the gaze had left. Immediately, his eyes closed tightly, as if he had escaped from the bottomless abyss. That gaze. Gain's heart was filled with ups and downs at this moment. Just a fleeting gaze, Gain's mind felt like falling into an ice cellar, with a chilling chill piercing through his bones. His unparalleled cultivation at this moment cannot give him any sense of security. This is different from the malice of choosing people and devouring them just now. Like the ferocious beasts and birds of prey, what I just experienced was a more terrifying chill. The gaze of the master was like a terrifying presence sitting high above the 9 heavens. His gaze was cold and merciless, like a merciless heavenly path, towering above and difficult to reach. How could it be? Gain's heart was filled with suspicion and uncertainty. Although aware of the threat of life and death, as a generation of swordsmen, he has his own rebellious spirit. Is it an illusion? San Gongzi is just an ordinary person, and many martial arts experts have been teaching him for many years, making it difficult for him to get started. How could there be such a terrifying gaze? It's impossible. Although Gain had doubts in his heart and was unwilling to believe, however, he dared not look up at Ying Ziheng anymore. Just as the atmosphere inside the Zhangtai Palace gradually became more solemn, a loud voice came from outside. The envoy of Yen state worships Qin and respectfully kowtow to Wang Wei. Chapter 3. Sword Masters Attack, Qin King in Danger. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. Xian. Ying Zheng raised his head slightly and whispered softly. Xian, the envoy of Yen state pays his respects. Xian, the envoy of Yen state pays his respects. Xian. Summoning sounds echoed from within the Zhangtai Palace. After a moment, under the gaze of the courtiers, the figure of the envoy of Yen gradually appeared outside the Zhangtai Palace. Yen envoy Yen Dai kowtowed to the king. Yen envoy Jing Ke, kowtow to the king. Yen envoy Qin Wuyang, kowtow to the king. The 3 envoys of Yen have already entered the Zhangtai Palace. The elderly man, dressed in splendid attire, although over 50 years old, has a tall and upright figure. Is it the younger brother of Yen Wangxi? Among the courtiers, some recognize the identity of Yen Dai. The envoys of Yen were actually members of the Yen royal family, and this posture can be said to be extremely low. If the news of the Yen royal family kowtowing to the Qin king spreads, the morale of the Yen army will definitely plummet. And behind Yen Dai, a refined warrior stands like a small mountain, with a surge of qi and blood all over his body. He is truly a martial artist from the innate realm. Another is an ordinary swordsman with a sword-like aura lingering on his body, who is also an innate swordsman. The realm of martial arts is nothing more than third-rate, second-rate, and first-class entering the innate realm, and the innate realm further advancing is the master. Above the great master, there are even great masters, heavenly beings, and even legendary land immortals. Congenitally, it can be considered a pillar outside, but now it is respectfully behind Yen Dai. The other courtiers glanced over the 2 innate beings and stopped paying attention. Even among the iron cavalry of the Great Qin, there can still be a place in the innate realm, but in the Zhangtai Palace, there were some difficulties. Not to mention the sword Saint Gain, who has been a great master for a long time, is now standing in the main hall with several powerful masters. The majestic voice of Ying Zheng rang out. The cigarette bag just dried up and looked up straight. However, his gaze still dared not look directly at the dark figure, and he only spoke. King Rong of Qin said that the state of Yen has never enjoyed conflict. When Qin conquered Zhao, Yen also sent troops in response. Now that the state of Zhao has been overthrown and the unification of the Great Qin is just around the corner, the state of Yen naturally will not be able to use the crab arm to block the chariot. Yandu spoke in a slightly elderly voice. Where she once offended Qin, Ji Yan had already realized her mistake. Today, Crown Prince Dan presents Fan Yuqi's head, hoping that the King of Qin can clear his past grievances. As soon as Yandu finished speaking, Jing Ke stepped forward behind him and raised the wooden box in his hand. The Crown Prince's pill. Upon hearing this, Ying Zheng was reminded of his past memories. When he was in Handan, Prince Dan, who was also a proton, was one of his few good friends. Now he has raised the warships of the Great Qin, and Prince Dan has also returned to the state of Yen. Ying Zheng's fleeting look of memories turned into indifference, and his heart remained calm. All that used to be a thing of the past, now under the iron cavalry of the Great Qin, there is a great journey to unify the world. However, remembering the past friendship, waiting until the horse steps on the Yen capital can allow Crown Prince Dan to live a peaceful life. Of course, the prerequisite is that he doesn't stop the Qin's footsteps, no matter who it is. It's not possible. Creak. The wooden box opened, and a bloody smell spread everywhere. Ying Zheng's gaze cast, and he vaguely saw the flesh and blood blurred head inside the wooden box. Well, take 50 steps forward and let me see more carefully. In the majestic voice of Ying Zheng, there was finally a ripple. There is both hatred towards traitors and the heartfelt execution of Fan Yuqi. Upon hearing this, Yandu and 3 others bent slightly and took 50 steps forward. The sword and army of Yen are not favorable, and wars and turmoil are frequent in various countries. It is likely that it will be difficult for them to improve themselves in the future. Today, I will present another map of Dukong for the protection of the Great Qin. Yandu continued to speak out. This time, Qin Wuyang behind him held a several-foot-long blueprint and stepped forward. Okay. At this moment, even though it was Ying Zheng's mentality, there was a fluctuation. Dukong is an important area of the Yen state. With this map, Qin's iron cavalry steps over Dukong, and the Yen state can be said to have opened its doors. Bring it up. Ying Zheng spoke out. At this moment, countless gazes converged on Qin Wuyang in the Zhangtai Palace. Even the gaze of Ying Zheng above the high throne was somewhat hot. However, to his surprise, Qin Wuyang remained motionless for a long time, and there was already a hint of surprise in the expressions of the courtiers. However, at this moment, Qin Wuyang couldn't care about anything else. Faced with hundreds of gazes, Qin Wuyang felt a chill in his heart. This the Great Qin who presides over the iron cavalry of the Great Qin and horizontally pushes the 6 kingdoms. Qin Wuyang felt like he was falling into an ice cellar. Under that terrifying aura, the horizontal cultivation of qi and blood in one's innate realm even felt a sense of stagnation. The terrifying flesh and blood power that once tore apart tigers and elephants seems to be non-existent at this moment. Shit, Qin Wuyang's refined figure began to tremble, emitting trembling sounds. Are you afraid? Sensing Qin Wuyang's trembling, Ying Zheng spoke with a hint of mockery in his tone. At this moment, Qin Wuyang had no energy to respond to the Yandu beside him. He also didn't expect such a situation, and for a moment, he didn't know how to explain it. Thinking of Prince Dan's dangerous move to assassinate the King of Qin, Yandu also felt a cold sweat on his forehead. Inside the map, carrying the divine weapon that pierced the King of Qin. But at this moment, Qin Wuyang's timidity attracted countless gazes. King Rong of Qin said, "He is just a disciple and a warrior, and he has never climbed the Great Qin Palace, not to mention facing King Wei of Qin directly. It is inevitable to be afraid of showing timidity. Please allow me to come forward and present this map of Dukong." Just as the atmosphere gradually became more solemn, Jing Ke took a step forward and spoke out. At this moment, the map was close in front of him, and Ying Zheng was a hot pillow. Glancing over Jing Ke, he spoke. With the promise, Jing Ke took the map and stepped out towards Ying Zheng. At this moment, even with Jing Ke's accustomed attitude of seeing life and death, there were still some ripples in his heart. He is already the core of all power in the Great Qin dynasty, and 50 steps away from him is the Qin Wangzheng. In a daze, Jing Ke saw the practice by the autumn water that day. Under a withered yellow maple tree, above a stone table and chair. Gao gradually moves away from building. The sound of high-pitched architectural music is like a fairy's voice, incessant in the ear. Pouring wine from the crown prince Dan, going to Xianyang would be a near death, but now the iron cavalry of the Great Qin is already imposing. Dan has no other choice but to play dangerous chess in order to have a chance of survival. Prince Dan's face was sorrowful, and he raised his glass in his hand and handed it to Jing Ke. A small mountain-like wine jar was piled up beside Jing Ke, with a rich and fragrant aroma lingering around. My eyes were bleary, as if I was about to get drunk and not wake up in the next moment. Dong, dong dong. Jing Ke is tapping on the stone table, emitting a pleasant melody that matches the sound of building. The words of Prince Dan fell, and Jing Ke looked up with drowsy eyes, reaching out to take the wine cup and drank it all in one gulp. Hiccup. A wine burp shot up into the sky, startling a flock of birds in the autumn forest. Violent Qin, cruel, and reckless military action, disregarding the life and death of the people in the world. Jing Ke was ignorant of military tactics and strategy, only possessing a white and sharp sword in his hand. I want to carve out a magnificent world for this murky world. Jing Ke's slightly intoxicated voice rang out, and Gao gradually left, who was pounding on the side, had an impassioned expression. The melody rises again, high and sorrowful. The autumn water murmurs, with withered branches and fallen leaves drifting away with the stream. Bang! Jing Ke threw the wine cup in his hand and smashed it into the autumn water, causing a wave of waves. Waves splashed and a few drops of autumn water fell on Jing Ke's face. The cold autumn water seemed to make Jing Ke's drunkenness fade away. The wind is howling and the water is cold. The brave man is gone and never returns. Jing Ke's body was filled with endless sword intent, and the winds and clouds of heaven and earth were turbulent. The trickling autumn water also began to form a little bit of cold ice under the cold sword of the forest. One step away, already far away. The great master of swordsmanship, Jing Ke, is determined to assassinate the king of Qin. In the Zhangtai Palace, only the footsteps of Jing Ke remained. 50 steps in an instant, Jing Ke had already arrived more than 10 steps away. 10 steps, 8 steps, suddenly, Guinya lowered his gaze and lifted it, landing on Jing Ke. Jing Ke slowly stepped onto the high platform, only 5 steps away from Ying Zheng. Watching Jing Ke's cautious demeanor, Guinya felt lost in thought. And just as Gain's thoughts were spinning, Shua. Jing Ke displayed the map in his hand, and several zhang of the map was like a train of horses, thinking of Ying Zheng rushing away. Afterwards, a white light flashed by. Jing Ke wields his sword and stabs directly. At this moment, the terrifying power of the great master is being unleashed recklessly. A terrifying sword gleamed in Ying Zheng's eyes. The picture is full of daggers. The great master of martial arts, known as the pinnacle swordsman, delivers a full blow at this moment. Not to mention ordinary courtiers, even many generals find it difficult to react. I could only tear my eyes with anger and drink in anger. Bold. Chapter 4. I've crossed the line. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ying Zheng's face was cold and gloomy, and the first thing reflected in his eyes was the map that could be considered as a masterpiece. Following closely behind was a sharp sword, making his eyes feel like needles. Life and death are at stake, and even Ying Zheng finds it difficult to maintain his dignity. At this moment, his face instantly turned pale, as if he had seen a terrifying scene of the underworld in a daze. Among them, countless soldiers from the 6 kingdoms were all roaring. If you fall into it, you may only be torn into pieces and blood foam during your breathing. However, everything is just in an instant. Under the determined alliance, even the illusion of consciousness is difficult to maintain. In the next moment, Ying Zheng had already regained his senses. At this moment, even though he was carrying a sword, he did not attempt to draw his sword and kill Jing Ke. The assassin in front of him was already breathing with the terrifying power of the great master. He drew his sword to confront each other, but was just dying. At this moment, Ying Zheng stood on one side of his body, his sword scabbard propped up beside the throne, and he withdrew and flipped into the throne. Everything was only in the blink of an eye, when Ying Zheng escaped and took refuge. Zhao Gao made a bold move on the side, exuding a soft and feminine aura as much as possible. Suddenly transformed into chains of dark shadows, I want to block Jing Ke from the throne. However, the chain that could imprison the powerful master was as thin as paper and vulnerable to a single blow in front of Jing Ke's sword. Collapse, collapse. With only a few clear noises, the black shadow chains had already turned into smoke and dissipated. Zhao Gao certainly had more than just this means, at the moment when the black shadow chain was broken. The shadow behind quickly spread and split out. Every shadow transforms into a powerful master's shadow, and it is truly the six swordsmen. The six swordsmen are a six-in-one entity, each performing their own duties. At this moment, the six swordsmen struck with all their might, and some even used the secret technique of shisheng. The six swordsmen all relied on Zhao Gao, who was also bound to the worship of the Great Qin. If Ying Zheng is assassinated, the outcome of the six swordsmen will also be dismal. The battle formation is formed, and the aura of the master is permeated. The six sword slaves are all putting their all into action. When? Dang dang. Dang 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 dang. The figure of Lu Dao wielding a sword collided with Jing Ke, although there was only Ying Zheng in Jing Ke's eyes. But the great master's strength permeates throughout his body. The six sword slaves who formed in formation can even make them retreat a bit against ordinary great masters. But at this moment, Jing Ke's assassination of the king of Qin has already had the intention of killing him. When Jing Ke grasped the hilt of the sword, he already understood that he could not retreat completely at this moment. Only by killing the king of Qin can we not disappoint the crown prince Dan's offer of support, and by now, Jing Ke, who was supposed to strike with all his might, had the determination to die. When sacrificing one's life and forgetting one's death, a sword is handed out. In a daze, the bottleneck that has been stuck in the realm of the great master for a long time seems to have loosened slightly. On that sword, a new force unexpectedly emerged. Although there is no unparalleled horizontal pressure that has reached the realm of heaven and humanity, it is also beyond the scope that ordinary beings can grasp. Under this new force, the terrifying killing moves of the six swordsmen in formation were even more shattered. After 6 crisp sounds, the 6 sword slaves stumbled and their famous swords were all broken. Although the attack of the 6 swordsmen was ineffective, the momentary disturbance had already slowed down Jing Ke's speed. For true martial arts experts, the slightest change is enough to determine life and death. The short delay has given other strong players in the Zhangtai Palace time to take action. Little Mouse Generation, dare to stab the king. Meng Tian's body was filled with surging breath, the ominous aura of battlefield fighting permeates and converges into a series of killing weapons, with swords, halberds, spears, they ran towards Jing Ke. However, the realm of the great master is not something that can be easily inferred. Even if Meng Tian attacks with all his might, it is still difficult to catch up with the sword that Jing Ke fought hard to cut. Watching Jing Ke's flash of sword light fly by, Meng Tian's heart was burning with anxiety at this moment. The power of the master constantly emerged, and the killing weapons transformed by the evil energy were also stained with a ferocious crimson. At the same time, in the shadow of Zhangtai Palace, a black figure also rushed out. It was none other than Zhang Han who was hiding beside him. At this moment, Zhang Han's eyes were crimson, and in his pupils, it was none other than Jing Ke's peerless sword. Zhang Han held a dragon xiang and unleashed the power of his master. Even by citing secret techniques, I am now at the peak of my master's realm, infinitely close to the realm of a great master. However, even so, it is still difficult to catch up with Jing Ke's peerless sword moves that are fleeting with light. Zheng. A sound of swords echoed through, and Gainye drew his sword from the side. Amidst the surging sword intent of Gainye, the aura of the great master's realm poured forth, indistinguishable from that of Jing Ke. The majestic sword intent surging within Gai Nie's body had already attached itself to the Yuanhong. I saw a faint flash of sword light on the body of the Yuanhong sword, followed by a trembling sound, and was about to release it. It is truly the 100-step flying sword in the vertical and horizontal sword technique. A 100-step flying sword, within 100 steps, block the throat upon seeing blood, and avoid ghosts and gods. However, even the unparalleled 100-step flying sword of Gai Nie is still difficult to show its power, because everything is only between lightning, fire, and stone. Faced with swordsmen who were also great masters, Gai Nie understood that ordinary swordsmanship would be difficult to block Jing Ke. Only the 100-step flying sword can instantly kill strong opponents in the same realm. But the 100-step flying sword is an unusual sword move that requires control with its own sword intent. Even though Gai Nie is a great master and needs a few breaths to sacrifice the 100 steps flying sword, how could Jing Ke sacrifice his life to strike and stop? At this moment, Jing Ke subconsciously realized the new force in his hand, and his sword was not only powerful, but even accelerated a bit. The throne, which has undergone countless trials and tribulations, crumbled under the sword intent of the great master's sacrifice. After shattering the throne, Ying Zheng's face was full of anger. "You dare to stab me alone." Ying Zheng's voice trembled, with a hint of panic but more anger and indignation. Violent Qin ravages and ruthless killing. As a tyrant, you should bear the responsibility of waiting for cause and effect. Today is your deadline. At this moment, Jing Ke's black hair was already graying out, and his body also had a slight hunch. He is sacrificing his sword at the cost of overdrawing his vitality. Violent Qin. Tyrant. Upon hearing this, Ying Zheng felt a surge of anger in his heart, even laughing at the life and death crisis before him. The 7 kingdoms were divided, and there were countless wars and turmoil. Rise up alone, the remnants of the Qin and 6 dynasties, and end the chaotic era. In your eyes, you are a tyrant. Compared to the achievements of the 3 emperors and 5 emperors, this great achievement is not much inferior. However, nowadays, such a grand undertaking is about to be lost in the hands of an assassin. Ying Zheng's gaze closed the entire Zhangtai palace in front of him, and within a short distance was Jing Ke giving birth to a sword. Behind Jing Ke was a crimson killing weapon transformed by Meng Tian's evil energy. On the other side, Zhang Han chased after him with a dragon xiang in his hand. And beside him, Gai Nie also held the Yuanhong in his hand. The great master's sword intent surged, and the abyssal rainbow in his hand came out like a vast rainbow, stabbing towards Jing Ke. However, everything was too late. Jing Ke seemed to have lost half of his life, with white beard and hair, and a hunched figure. Half of its vitality has already merged into this peerless sword. This sword, blooming with endless vitality, is also cold death. Is it really difficult to escape this calamity today? In a daze, endless sadness rose in Ying Zheng's heart. At this moment, the tip of Jing Ke's sword was only within a short distance, and the cold and deadly sword aura filled the air. Ying Zheng could even feel the sword intent piercing his cheek. However, even so, Ying Zheng's eyes remained angry and wide open. As the eternal emperor, even if you die, you must die clearly and not go to the neck to be slaughtered. Just as the cold sword was about to pierce into Ying Zheng's eyebrows, a golden body shadow suddenly appeared in front of him, tearing apart the void. Ziheng. In a daze, Ying Zheng recognized this figure at a glance. It was his former Kalinzi, Ying Ziheng. Without waiting for him to have any more thoughts, he heard Ying Ziheng speak calmly and coldly. Wait, it's over the line. Chapter 5. Desert Emperor, Supreme Authority. New. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ying Ziheng's words were cold and indifferent. Between every word and sentence spoken, it contains endless authority. Like the highest deity above the 9 heavens, overlooking the ants in the mortal world. Who is it? Ying Ziheng suddenly appeared, even though he was the great master of Jing Ke, he never realized his strength. A golden light flashed in front of him, and then the handsome man in a golden silk robe appeared in front of him. The golden silk robe, with a handsome appearance, reminded Jing Ke of a name taboo. Ying Ziheng. De Qin San Gongzi. It is the legendary Kalinzi who was born with a natural anomaly at that time, born on both days and carrying the Haori ring. Unfortunately, later on, it did not show any extraordinary qualities and was mediocre. Now he is just an inconspicuous one among many young masters of the Great Qin. Humph, it's just pretending to be a ghost. Jing Ke realized the identity of the young master in front of him and felt disdainful in his heart. In his view, the many images at birth should be just rumors used by the royal family of the Great Qin to promote the orthodoxy of the royal family. If there were such terrifying visions, wouldn't it be fate for the Great Qin to unify the 6 states? He is just an ordinary mortal young master, who dares to block the sword with his own body. Are you eager to protect your father? But today the king of Qin will surely die. Since that's the case, I will first execute the 3 young masters in front of me, and then execute the tyrant of the king of Qin. In an instant, Jing Ke had already made plans and his killing intent grew stronger in his heart. At this moment, Jing Ke's sword light rose again in his hand. There is already a sword shard condensed from the sword body, almost ready to shoot away from the sword. On the side, Ying Zheng thought that Ying Ziheng wanted to block the sword with his body, and a warm current surged in his heart. Although Ying Ziheng may seem mediocre, his unwavering sacrifice to block the sword has deeply touched Ying Zheng's heart. Even though he lacks talent, he is still his flesh and blood relative. Feeling Jing Ke's more fierce sword intent, Ying Zheng instinctively reached out to push Ying Ziheng away. Zhao Gao noticed Ying Ziheng's appearance on the side and instinctively cast his gaze. At this moment, Ying Ziheng's expression was indifferent, calm, and his eyes were fixed on Jing Ke's sword. 3rd young master. At this moment, the courtiers in Zhangtai Palace also noticed Ying Ziheng and exclaimed in surprise. Meng Tian also saw it and was suddenly surprised. Although San Gongzi did not show any talent in martial arts, he had also taught for some time, which can be considered as having some emotional connection. At this moment, facing the sword of giving up life, Meng Tian's heart became even more anxious. Subconsciously mobilizing more power from the master, but he himself did not realize it. As the whole body's strength was released, the bottleneck of the master was gradually loosening. In an instant, all directions have changed again. However, under the sword of Jing Ke's sacrifice, it was still difficult to turn the tide. In the next moment, Jing Ke's sword had already drawn a terrifying deadline in his hand, piercing straight towards Ying Ziheng. The sword is unparalleled, showcasing the style of a great master. Above it, there is a hint of power that Jing Ke gained through sacrificing his life for righteousness, and his power is even stronger. Even the strong masters who are also great masters, even a slight mistake under this sword will result in death. However, when the sword fell in front of Ying Ziheng, there was only a hint of disdain in his eyes. The strong wind sweeping in front of me brings endless yellow sand, as if to bury the whole world. The yellow sand converges into a thick shield, with the thick yellow sand shield lying horizontally in front of Ying Ziheng. Shisheng's sword pierced on it, making a sound of interlocking gold and stone. The two are constantly entangled and attacking. The terrifying sword of Jing Ke is like a maggot attached to the bones, constantly eroding the thick yellow sand shield. However, the thick yellow sand shield seems to have gathered the power of the earth and is indestructible, allowing the sword of Shisheng to ravage but standing still. As soon as Ying Ziheng crossed this world, he integrated the template of Desert Emperor Azir. That's right, it's the Desert Emperor Azir who once made a name for himself in Furima. Azir was a mortal emperor of Shurima in ancient times, a peerless genius only one step away from immortal mythology. Until he was betrayed and stripped of his authority to kill him. His heroic deeds gradually faded away under the power of time, but even endless years cannot erase Azir's terrifying power. Until a long time later, he was reborn and became a more terrifying ascent. Becoming the supreme emperor in charge of the ascending kingdom. When he was born, he integrated 1% of Azel's template, and then he had various images of 2-day symbiosis. And now, Ying Ziheng subconsciously summoned the Asa template. Template. Azir, Desert Emperor, Fusion Progress. 5% of fusion degree of 5% may not reproduce Asa's various divine spells, but it is only against a small master, it is just a matter of overturning hands. Finally, with the complete disappearance of Shisheng's sword, the courtiers looked up and saw the thick yellow sand shield, completely undamaged. Silence, the ultimate stillness. At this moment, the Zhangtai Palace has completely fallen into silence. However, in the next moment, Jing Ke continued to thrust his long sword in his hand. That sword light is just an extension of Jing Ke's sword intention, and the same killing intent still exists. The long sword held by Jing Ke, combined with the terrifying power of the Great Master, is enough to destroy everything. Squeak. How could it be? Jing Ke exclaimed in surprise. He found that no matter how much he infused the terrifying power of the Great Master, he could still not pierce through the thick yellow sand shield in front of him. Meanwhile, the entire Zhangtai Palace remained silent. Gaine's 100 steps flying sword aura gradually faded, and at this moment, his gaze fell on Ying Ziheng with a strange expression. The third young master in front of me doesn't seem as unbearable as I had heard before. And Meng Tian also fell into a state of stagnation. I once personally taught the third young master, and naturally understood that he had no talent in martial arts. However, the terrifying power demonstrated by Ying Ziheng now exceeds his understanding. What terrifying power is it that the Great Master sacrificed his life to strike and was so lightly blocked? Although Meng Tian was stunned for a moment, he quickly regained his senses. Seeing that Jing Ke's sword failed to strike, he quickly burst out and shouted. Assassin rat generation, be captured quickly. As Meng Tian's angry voice sounded, powerful figures such as generals and hidden shadow guards rushed towards him. Amidst the surging aura of the martial artists around, there are already many masters with strong abilities. At this moment, Jing Ke woke up from the defeat of Shisheng's sword and watched as anger reignited in the hearts of the powerful forces of the Great Qin who were constantly oppressed around him. At this moment, he once again aroused the terrifying power of the Great Master, sweeping out a majestic sword with one sword that permeated the air. Dozens or even hundreds of shadow guards were all swept by a sword, even though they had risen to strike, it was difficult to touch Jing Ke in the slightest. I had to let out a scream of agony and fell on the spot. And the rest. Several powerful masters are all trying their best to resist, but in the face of crossing a great realm of strength, it is equally difficult to make achievements. Unexpectedly fell into a stalemate for a moment. With a single sword, Jing Ke's gaze once again shifted to Ying Ziheng as he swung away many powerful figures. At this moment, yellow sand had already fallen in front of Ying Ziheng like drifting snow, revealing his handsome figure. He are you the legendary third prince Ying Ziheng? Jing Ke's tone carried a hint of madness. However, Ying Ziheng did not respond and only glanced over, with even greater disdain. According to rumors, the third young master Ying Ziheng is just an ordinary person, but now with such strength, it seems that the heavens do not allow me to punish the cruel Qin. Jing Ke considered his own words. Not fair. It's unfair. The heavens are unjust. Violent Qin is cruel. Why not execute? Jing Ke roared up to the sky. However, upon hearing these words, Ying Zheng felt even colder in his heart. Violent Qin. Cruelty. Lonely desire to unify the world and end the war. Was such a great achievement criticized as a cruel act? During the chaos of the Warring States period, there were constant wars, with many soldiers deeply trapped in the battlefield and countless people struggling to survive. If killing is considered cruel, which of these other 6 countries is not a cruel country? Which country's ruler is not a cruel ruler? Is it wrong to want to unify the world and return it to a peaceful world? For a moment, Ying Zheng's heart was filled with sorrow, and an indescribable bitterness filled his heart. Absurdity. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded, and Ying Zheng instinctively looked over. At this moment, Ying Ziheng in front of him spoke up. It's ridiculous that in such a chaotic world, what I, the Great Qin, have walked is a brilliant path. Chapter 6, Then kill him all the way until he kowtow and submit. You are listening at novel full.audio. Glory. Jing Ke murmured subconsciously, with a look of desolation and indignation in his eyes. Is the so-called glory a great road forged with the living beings of the 6 countries as the petals? Is the so-called glory the road paved by killing 400,000 surrendered soldiers in a white pit? Is the so-called glory the path of extortion and extravagance, with all swords and weapons as the cornerstone? Can one disregard one's life and pave the so-called glorious road of the Great Qin dynasty with the flesh and blood of the people for the sake of the so-called glorious road? Jing Ke's every word and phrase is a complaint. However, in the face of Jing Ke's accusations, Ying Ziheng only glanced at him and couldn't help but feel a bit amused. The disdain in my gaze has now turned into substance. I saw a cold smile on Ying Ziheng's lips at some point, and his cold voice rang out again. However, there was a hint of anger in the tone this time. Is it for such ridiculous reasons that Shisheng was assassinated? Even Ying Ziheng is unwilling to entangle with Jing Ke anymore at this moment. Without waiting for Jing Ke to react, he continued to speak out. The world is chaotic, and each country is acting independently. There are countless wars and turmoil among countries, and the people are even more displaced. You angrily rebuke the Great Qin for using the flesh and blood of the people as the cornerstone of the earth and stone. However, do you know how many people were displaced during the conquests of various countries before our Great Qin unified the country, making life more difficult than death? Do you know how many people have died in wars and conflicts? Jing Ke originally thought that Ying Ziheng would use strong arguments to argue, but he was thrown out with a series of questioning questions. At this moment, Jing Ke was already stunned and didn't know how to answer. During times of war, various countries fought against each other, and the number of people who died each year from the war exceeded 1 million, and this is just because of the number of deaths caused by war, not to mention other civilians who died tragically due to natural and man-made disasters. Jing Ke heard Ying Ziheng's voice again and couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Subconsciously unwilling to listen to what Ying Ziheng said, as if evading, you said that in the Great Qin dynasty, I extorted and used up all my weapons and knives. Do you know that the tax I paid in Daqin was a population tax? The taxes levied by the Great Qin dynasty were based on the population, and each person only paid 1 tax. If they joined the military, they would be exempt from tax reduction. If the Great Qin dynasty was known for its excessive taxation, what about the tax systems of other countries? I abandoned the wells and fields in the Great Qin dynasty and opened up fields, which freed many people from the suffering of the nobility. Even as a commoner, one can still work diligently without worrying about food and clothing. Which country among the other can compare? Under the severe punishment of the Qin dynasty, thieves and bandits are all afraid to violate Qin's laws. The atmosphere of the Great Qin dynasty has already become a relic of ancient times, with no one to leave their homes at night. Which country among the nations can rival it? At this moment, many literary officials under Zhangtai Palace couldn't help but nod and praise Ying Ziheng's remarks. Since the reform of the Great Qin dynasty, many systems have been extremely superior, but they cannot be reflected temporarily. At this moment, listening to Ying Ziheng speak one by one, all of them have gained a deeper understanding of the system of the Great Qin. Ying Ziheng's every word was brilliant, and every word spoken revealed a hint of confusion and pain on Jing Ke's face. However, Ying Ziheng did not intend to spare Jing Ke like this and continued speaking. Do you say that the Great Qin dynasty was full of military prowess? Let me ask you, what kind of other countries are they like? On the court, treacherous officials are in power. Our Great Qin only relied on wealth and silk to alienate important officials from other countries, and there are only a few who have taken over local countries. In the battle of extinguishing Zhao, the king of Zhao believed in slander and executed Li Mu. Only then did our Great Qin defeat Zhao in one fell swoop. Such treacherous courtiers are everywhere in various countries. On the other hand, under the system of military merit and nobility in the Great Qin dynasty, everyone is like a dragon. As long as you excel on the battlefield and kill enemies, you will receive corresponding achievements. Even a humble commoner can still be granted titles and land. Which country among the other countries is compared to our Great Qin? At this moment, Jing Ke's face had turned pale, his lips trembling, and a hint of fear had appeared in his eyes. He found himself unable to refute Ying Ziheng's many questioning. But Ying Ziheng's voice did not stop. Now in the Great Qin dynasty, with horses trampling on the world, unifying all countries would save countless wars and turmoil. With just one move, it has invisibly enabled hundreds of thousands of people to continue to survive. Isn't this a brilliant path? I, the Great Qin, ruled the world, and the Qin system was implemented throughout the territory of the Great Qin, so that all the people in the territory of Daqin can cover their bodies with clothing and have enough food to eat. Make my roads in the territory of Daqin deserted, and stay indoors at night. Enable all the people within the territory of Daqin to be granted titles and land allocation. What country can rival such a prosperous era? What can't be called a brilliant avenue like this? Jing Ke wanted to refute, but racked his brains but couldn't say a word. It seems that everything Ying Ziheng said is explaining the facts, but this is completely different from his previous impression of the cruel Qin dynasty. Even if it's a huge difference. Where exactly was wrong? The great master Jing Ke has already fallen into a chaotic state, which is difficult to describe. I, the Great Qin, ruled the world in accordance with the will of the people and the will of heaven. The route I have taken in Daqin is a brilliant avenue. Everything that I have done in the Great Qin dynasty will be decided after thousands of years, and my achievements in the Great Qin dynasty will be judged by future generations. However, at this moment, we are all the people holding pens in the history of the Qin dynasty. No matter what the future holds, the magnificent road of Daqin will be personally composed by us. There was a sense of panic in Ying Ziheng's voice, and at this moment, the courtiers in Zhangtai Palace were all in awe, listening attentively to Ying Ziheng's words. Is this a brilliant avenue for me in Daqin? Can the place where my Great Qin Suanio black flag stands be a pure land? Isn't it appropriate for all the countries to surrender such a Great Qin? I, the Great Qin, am so glorious and prosperous, willing to share with all the people of the world. Why are you making such a fuss here? Until I, the Great Qin, unify the world, all under the Housen will be the land of Qin, and above the land of Qin will be the people of Qin. To make the whole world recognize that Xian bird black chess, to make the whole world aware of my prosperous era in the Great Qin dynasty, let all the people in this world be my Great Qin people. Ying Ziheng's voice gradually rose high, and infinite waves of sound surged and fluctuated in the Zhangtai Palace, shaking people's hearts and minds. Ziheng. At this moment, Ying Zheng's gaze turned to Ying Ziheng with a hint of joy. Ying Ziheng's words and actions were like a heavy hammer striking in Ying Zheng's heart, echoing the thoughts of the Great Qin in his heart. What Ying Ziheng said about the Great Qin is exactly what he has been striving for to unify. Ying Zheng has started to re-examine his own Qilin son, who has been ordinary for many years, as if for today's stunning success. In the palace, the courtiers were also shocked by what Ying Ziheng had said. Meng Tian, whose evil energy had not yet dissipated, had a burning gaze and was filled with hot blood that was about to burst out. Under the Housen, there are all Qin soil, and above Qin soil, there are all Qin people. Such lofty words and aspirations have already made Meng Tian yearn for them. Can I witness the prosperous era of the Great Qin dynasty? Suddenly, Meng Tian thought to himself. Meanwhile, Zhang Han beside him was also deeply moved. At this moment, as Ying Ziheng's momentum rose, he seemed to see the shadow of Ying Zheng's youth behind Ying Zheng. Zhao Gao's face darkened, with a hint of coldness in his eyes. Zhao Gao was also re-examining the third young master in front of him. The mediocrity of the past seemed like a disguise to him at this moment. Everything is for today's stunning success. Even with Zhao Gao's city government, it must be acknowledged at this time that, I misread third young master and misread Ying Ziheng. After such deafening and ambitious words, Jing Ke could no longer speak. After regaining his senses, his lips trembled as he opened and closed, but it was difficult to refute. Finally, after a while, Jing Ke spoke in a muffled voice. If anyone is unwilling to submit. Before Jing Ke could finish speaking, Ying Ziheng's eyes turned cold and his face turned cold. Then kill. Kill anyone who does not submit to the Great Qin. Kill them all the way, until they kneel down on my Qin soil, until they bow down and submit. Chapter 7. This son must not be left behind. You are listening at novel full.audio. Quiet, a tranquil desert. The cold and solemn atmosphere filled the Zhangtai Palace, and Ying Ziheng seemed to have endless killing opportunities all around him. At this moment, Ying Ziheng's gaze was icy. In just a few words, contempt for life has already emerged. Those who are unwilling to submit to the Great Qin seem like ants to Ying Ziheng. Humble and insignificant, not worth mentioning, even if it was run over casually, I wouldn't take a second look. In the Zhangtai Palace, many courtiers fell silent in the face of Ying Ziheng's terrifying aura at this moment. Several young civil servants were in a fierce battle, with pale faces. The admiration for Ying Ziheng that had just risen faded away again under the icy killing intent. Ying Zheng's gaze shone brightly as he scrutinized Ying Ziheng again. At this moment, in Ying Zheng's eyes, Ying Ziheng seemed to step into the human world on a sea of blood and flesh mountain, carrying the terror of the human Tai Sui god. The sense of joy in Ying Zheng's eyes was even stronger than that. Others see what Ying Ziheng said as a Shura act that slaughters the common people, but Ying Zheng understood that what Ying Ziheng said was the only way to unify the world in this chaotic world. Only with a thunderous momentum and a domineering attitude can one step on the six kingdoms and unify the world. Only then can the vast divine power of the Great Qin spread throughout the universe. On the other side of Zhangtai Palace, it is different from many literary officials who have a cold heart and trembling gallbladder. The generals were eager to give it a try, and many new generals had a burning look in their eyes. The Great Qin had a military merit system, so a large group of soldiers were fearless of war and slaughter. Even more so, they are enjoying the slaughter. At this moment, under the boundless killing intent of Ying Ziheng, many generals were shocked, but there was a sense of joy in finding a close friend. Zhang Hanin was hidden under the shadow of a mysterious bird pillar on one side, and couldn't help but look up at Ying Ziheng's words. Under a pitch-black and cold mask, Zhang Han's eyes showed a hint of surprise. I was once arranged by Ying Zheng to work as a shadow guard next to this young master, and it can be said that I watched him grow up. Although later on, due to his mediocre talent, his personality did not have the same domineering and arrogant demeanor as it does now. Feeling the unparalleled momentum in Ying Ziheng's words. That young figure, in a daze, he saw the shadow of young Ying Zheng on Ying Ziheng. Kill AI, execute LV Buwei, regain the power of the Great Qin, fight for the strength of the sixth generation, and trample on the world with horses. I think only this timeless emperor can give birth to such an unparalleled young master. Jing Ke has lost half of his life force, but at this moment his figure is still upright, as if he has the ambition to soar into the sky. The sword intent around the body not only did not fade, but also became somewhat strong. Just now, Ying Ziheng asked many questions, but Jing Ke was unable to answer them. And when I asked myself, I received a reply from Ying Ziheng with such killing intent. A chill had already risen in Jing Ke's heart. His gaze fell on Ying Ziheng, as if he saw a terrifying demon god slaughtering countless people. Jing Ke understood that what Ying Ziheng said was a true confession. If Ying Ziheng were to take power, the countries would probably suffer another loss of life. In terms of this magnificent killing intent, even the explosive Qin Ying Zheng is slightly inferior. At this moment, in Jing Ke's eyes, Ying Ziheng suddenly became a terrifying demon god with a sharp sword and a penchant for killing. However, Jing Ke's gaze was fierce, swaying back and forth between Ying Ziheng and Ying Zheng. The Great Qin dynasty is thriving day by day, and other countries may not be able to match the iron cavalry of the Great Qin dynasty. However, as we all know, although the Great Qin dynasty was at its peak, there was no prince who could be considered a talented official in the Qin dynasty. The De Qin lineage is like rootless water, destined to be difficult to survive. But Ying Ziheng made a remarkable achievement. This third prince of the Great Qin may become the crown prince of the Great Qin, and it is not impossible for him to take over the power of the Great Qin in the future. At this moment, Jing Ke thought that in the future, the massive killing machine of De Qin would be controlled by this god of killing. Even though he has already sacrificed himself and forgotten to die at this moment, he still feels a chill in his heart. This item cannot be kept. However, in an instant, Jing Ke had already gained consciousness. The tyrant Ying Zheng would not hesitate to die, but the future slaughter of the three young masters of the Great Qin in front of him is likely to be even greater than that of Ying Zheng. Facing Ying Ziheng's cold and ruthless gaze once again, Jing Ke's sword intent surged again. Between the surging of qi and blood all over the body, it permeates through the skin. Jing Ke seemed to have transformed into a bloody person, with countless qi and blood spreading along his arms onto the sword edge. The great master's willingness to sacrifice his sword is about to erupt. Zheng. With just a clanging sound, Jing Ke had already turned into a rainbow and stabbed towards Ying Ziheng with a sword. If Ying Ziheng is executed today, among the many salaries of Ying Zheng, he will no longer be able to wield great power. Even if the tyranny of Qin could unify the world, it would still lay many hidden dangers. I believe there will be people in the future who can overthrow the cruel Qin dynasty. But if Ying Ziheng were to inherit the throne, there would be no more hope in this world. Just now, I gave up my sword and burned half of my vitality in vain. Now that I am no longer alive, it may be better to be completely shattered. In the blink of an eye, the final vitality surges and operates the secret method. Jing Ke's aura is even stronger, and the concentrated and violent aura of the Great Master is clearly visible. At this moment, Jing Ke's aura unexpectedly reached the peak of the Great Master, even more powerful than the sword just now. Above the blade of the sword, a stream of light flickered, as if a terrifying aura of sword slaying the heavens and humans was pervasive. The resurgence of Jing Ke's terrifying aura was just a blink of an eye. Many strong people believed that Jing Ke had exhausted half of his life force and had already surrendered his life to capture, but at this moment, a desperate blow was unexpected. Meng Tian saw the situation and burst out in anger. "Dare you!" The body's evil energy once again emerged, experiencing the circulation of crimson evil energy just now. At this moment, the power of Master Meng Tian has entered the realm of transformation, and it is only time for him to break through the realm of a great master in the future. Zhang Han, who was also hidden in the shadows, also changed his expression. Just now, Jing Ke had no chance of killing him, and even he did not notice any signs. At this moment, Jing Ke's sword rises again, and the person stabbed is Ying Ziheng. Under Ying Ziheng's bold and ambitious words just now, in Zhang Han's eyes, Ying Ziheng was already the destined helmsman for the future of Qin. How could he see Ying Ziheng being stabbed at this moment? In an instant, many powerful figures in the entire Zhangtai palace rushed towards Jing Ke. However, behind Ying Zheng, Zhao Gaoshang did not take action. At this moment, his gaze was gloomy, falling on Ying Ziheng. Suppress the idea of summoning a trap and capturing and killing Jing Ke. With a desperate sword, Jing Ke's terrifying power and recent strength were even stronger. Can Ying Ziheng survive under this sword? At this moment, a ray of hope rose in Zhao Gao's heart. If Ying Ziheng dies, then the Great Qin side will have the opportunity to operate on its own, and just as many gazes converged, Ying Ziheng looked at the approaching sword with a calm expression. The palm under the golden silk robe was raised and held forward with a soft grip. As the palm protruded, a terrifying aura filled the Zhangtai palace. It seems like a brilliant sun shining brightly, like the thick earth. But in a blink of an eye, a layer of yellow sand mist barrier that is not difficult to see through has already permeated within the circle of Ying Ziheng. Jing Ke's sword plunged into the yellow sand like a sunken stone in the sea, making it difficult to penetrate inch by inch. Yellow sand swept through, enveloping Jing Ke's entire body. I only heard Ying Ziheng's divine voice resounding in the Zhangtai palace. The coffin of yellow sand. The yellow sand mist barrier turned into a coffin, and surprisingly, it contained Jing Ke in it. Chapter 8. Sandstorm Funeral, 5 Days to Flatten Yandu. You are listening at novel full.audio. The yellow sand coffin stands proudly inside the Zhangtai palace. The coffin is thick and solid, emitting a majestic momentum. At first glance, it seems as if there is an infinite mystery running through it, with a mysterious and breathtaking depth hidden within it. Inside the yellow sand coffin, Jing Ke had already realized that he was being suppressed. With a tremble of the sword in his hand, he surprisingly shook out the sword intent of the great master one after another, like a blooming epiphyllum. The infinite sword intent permeates the coffin. However, no matter how the sword edge in Jing Ke's hand flipped, he was trapped in the yellow sand coffin, making it difficult to reveal any information. It seems that at this moment, he has become an incredibly weak ant, resisting the supreme sky. I don't believe it. Jing Ke continued to wield his sword as if he didn't believe in evil, and as the sharp sword intent flashed out one after another, he was bounced open by the coffin. At this moment, Jing Ke's chi and blood have declined, but his sword intent is even more fierce, even reaching the threshold of the legendary realm of heaven and humanity at this moment. But even though it is inspiring infinite power, this yellow sand coffin is difficult to break through. Jing Ke's sword intent lingered around him, and he suddenly realized that the coffin was constantly shrinking. Just now, he was still able to dance with the sword edge in his hand, but at this moment, the sword in his hand is no longer agile. Jing Ke's gaze sank, and an indescribable mood rose from his body and permeated the sword. As the artistic conception attached to the sword edge, Jing Ke's skeletal body became even more withered. It's already skin and bones, but the deep sunken eyes are bursting with infinite brilliance. Zheng. After a sword roar, Jing Ke handed out a sword. This sword was Jing Ke's last sword, and regardless of the outcome, he was destined to die after this sword. Bang! With a crisp sound, the sword in Jing Ke's hand suddenly broke. The peerless sword gifted by Crown Prince Dan was unexpectedly broken in this yellow sand coffin. As Jing Ke's sword shattered and shattered, there was also his last glimmer of hope. The yellow sand coffin contracted faster, and finally, Jing Ke's deeply trapped eyes reflected the yellow sand in front of him. In the yellow sand, billions of kingdoms are reflected. Every grain of yellow sand is a country. In the kingdom, countless creatures are worshipping a golden figure that shines like the sun. Shine on forever. The figure looked at me and it was Ying Ziheng. Crown Prince, I failed. Jing Ke let out a bitter smile, and the endless yellow sand turned into the verdict of death, completely falling. Bang! A dull voice echoed through the Zhangtai palace. The yellow sand coffin on that side has been transformed back into yellow sand, and blood is permeating over the yellow sand on that beach. The great master of the generation, Jing Ke, has fallen. Ying Ziheng waved his hand casually, and the blood-stained yellow sand passed away with the wind. At this moment, there is no longer any bloody smell in the Zhangtai palace. It seems like everything that happened just now was just a dream and a bubble. Instant kill. Even Ying Zheng couldn't calm his emotions. Surprisingly, a great master was instantly wiped out by Ying Ziheng, even leaving no trace. Such terrifying strength is nothing more than that, even the heavenly and human powerhouses. So what kind of strength is Ying Ziheng, the pinnacle of heaven and humanity? Or is it the legendary land deity? Ying Zheng was ecstatic in his heart. When Ying Ziheng was born, many strange phenomena made him even more fond of this Kalinzi. Later on, the mediocrity and impermanence also made him feel heartbroken, and he didn't expect to make a remarkable breakthrough today. Ying Zheng's heart was full of joy, and even a hint of smile appeared on his face, which was always dignified. Gudong in the silence of Zhangtai Palace, someone swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Many gazes cast upon him, and he was none other than a young literary minister. Feeling many oppressive gazes, the young minister was even more frightened at this moment. The terrifying scene of the third young master manipulating the infinite yellow sand and annihilating a great master in an instant just now has already shocked him. At this moment, under many gazes, there were even more two battles, almost kneeling down. San Gongzi, how could he manipulate such an evil and extraordinary technique as Huang Sha? Trembling and trembling, the young minister murmured and looked frightened. The civil minister beside him heard the sound and quickly distanced himself from this person, afraid of being implicated. No matter what abilities Ying Ziheng possesses, he is ultimately the third young master of the Great Qin. Not to mention manipulating Huang Sha, even if it is a matter of ghosts and gods, it is not something that others can ignore. The young minister reacted, his face pale, his body trembling uncontrollably, and he swallowed the latter half of the sentence back into his stomach. His gaze lowered, he dared not take another look at Ying Ziheng, afraid of causing a fatal accident. A great master, kill in an instant. At this moment, Meng Tian's heart was also filled with turbulent waves. Ying Ziheng's unpredictable sand manipulation technique has made it difficult for him to understand. And the power of this yellow sand is even more terrifying, as a great master was buried and annihilated beneath it. Meng Tian's gaze showed a hint of admiration, indicating that the third young master he had taught had been hiding his mistakes since childhood. After Meng Tian, among many generals, one of the newly appointed generals had fiery eyes. In his gaze, there was already a fervent expression, and with every move and gesture, Ying Ziheng was the annihilation of a great master. In his opinion, even land immortals are nothing more than this divine power. In a daze, he seemed to see a supreme throne made of yellow sand rising up, holding Ying Ziheng high above the 9 heavens, like a deity. If the third young master inherits the throne. Subconsciously, a thought that could be considered a heinous and unethical idea popped up in the minds of the newly appointed generals, but at this moment it permeated like a maggot attached to the bones. And when this idea arose, the newly appointed generals seemed to see another scene before their eyes. That is the third young master standing on top of thousands of people in a golden silk robe. Today, I have unified the Great Qin dynasty. Under the Hausen, all the land is Qin territory, and above Qin territory, all the Qin people. Your Majesty. When all the dust settled, Lise took a step and spoke out. Report to the king. This assassination is dangerous and insults the power of our Great Qin. Fortunately, the king has been protected by heaven and is safe and sound. In my opinion, this is also an opportunity. At this moment, Ying Zheng stood on the high hall of Zhangtai Palace and heard what Li Si had said, then he promised. Keep going. Li Si nodded slightly and continued. The act of Jing Ke's assassination was carried out in the name of an envoy from the state of Yen. How can the envoys of Yen country tolerate such a heinous event if they commit a crime? Ying Zheng was naturally not an ordinary person. Upon hearing Li Si's words, he immediately reacted. Jing Ke's assassination of Qin was originally based on the reason that the envoys of Yen worship Qin. Named by Qin, actually a thorn king. Who can bear the charge of stabbing the king? In this way, even if Qin was a horse stepping on the capital of Yen, he also became famous. After understanding the reason behind it, Ying Zheng looked solemn and said in a deep voice. Those below the Yen envoy who commit crimes cannot be punished. As soon as Ying Zheng finished speaking, one of the many generals had already stepped out step by step. My lord, Li Zhengyuan is willing to lead the army, and the horse steps on the capital of Yen. Before the words could be finished, another newly appointed general spoke out. My lord, Han Dang, I am willing to set foot in the capital of Yen and capture and kill the king of Yen. I. At this moment, waves of voices have been stirred up among the generals, constantly requesting orders to go on an expedition. The system of military merit and nobility in the Great Qin dynasty is the cornerstone, and as long as one carries military merit, they can be granted marquises and land parcels. Now that there is an opportunity to annihilate Yen, it is natural to compete first. Ying Zheng's gaze swept over the many passionate generals under the Zhangtai Palace, but they had not yet spoken. At this moment, in addition to the sense of danger in his heart, there was also a surging hatred towards Yen Kingdom, the great terror between life and death. Now that one can step on the Yandu with a horse, how can such an opportunity be missed? There was a hint of determination in Ying Zheng's gaze. As he was about to give a commanding voice, Ying Ziheng's cold voice rang out. I am willing to leave Xianyang and conquer the capital of Yen. Within 5 days, you can retrieve the heads of the king of Yen and the crown prince's pill. Chapter 9. Power is the emperor's best play. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As the word settled, the courtiers in Zhangtai Palace trembled with their eyes and converged towards Ying Ziheng. The figure in the golden silk robe stood proudly, with a handsome face and a faint breath all around. A calm gaze revealed a coldness, without any emotion. 5 days. Some of the courtiers instinctively spoke out. You can obtain the heads of the king of Yen and the crown prince Dan in 5 days. How arrogant this is. You should know that the distance between the Great Qin and the Yen kingdom is no more than 10,000 miles, with many cities obstructing it, not to mention the 100,000-strong army stationed in the capital of Yen. Even though Ying Ziheng possesses the ability to manipulate the yellow sand evil, his aura ultimately appears to be nothing more than a great master. Not to mention being a great master, it is equally difficult to compete with the heavenly and human powerhouses above the great master when facing 100,000 army. Only by relying on the powerful strength of heaven and man, and infiltrating the army and beheading enemy generals, can we disrupt the army formation. Otherwise, if surrounded by a large army, even those who are strong in heaven and humanity will be deeply trapped in it. In the eyes of the courtiers, Ying Ziheng remained calm and composed. It seems that just now saying a 5-day deadline is just an ordinary thing for him. Third young master, don't entrust me with anything. One of the civil ministers took a step forward and advised me. He also understood the terror of 100,000 soldiers with the eyes of a literati. In just 5 days, all he could think of was going deep alone and fighting back in the water. Even so, whether we can win or not remains to be seen. Just now, Ying Ziheng gained a lot from his understanding of the Great Qin system. Now seeing the third young master promising to retrieve the heads of the king of Yen and the crown prince Dan within 5 days, it is a false belief that Ying Ziheng is relying on his own strength. As the old civil servant spoke out, several of the key generals among the generals also began to dissuade. However, in the blink of an eye, there were constant voices of dissuasion in the Zhangtai Palace. And among the other newly appointed generals, there was also an uproar. The three young masters have unparalleled combat power, but it may not be easy to capture the capital of Yen in 5 days. In 5 days' time, even if it's a simple ride, it can only reach the bottom of Yandu city and come back. With 5 days' time and fighting, how can it be enough to go back and forth? Even if it were my iron cavalry from the Great Qin dynasty approaching Yandu, without 2 or 3 days of effort, it would still be difficult to break through the city. How can San Gongzi win when he plans to push the capital of Yen horizontally for 5 days? Zhao Gao, who was standing with his hands down, was surprised by Ying Ziheng's remarks and his gaze flickered over him. Do you think that killing a great master would make you invincible? In Zhao Gao's view, Ying Ziheng has already started to take great pride in himself. If he continues like this, he will naturally die young one day. 5 days. Ying Zheng frowned slightly at this moment. He was already familiar with the map between Daqin and Yen, but at this moment, he was also worried about the 5-day time given by Ying Ziheng. 5 days was barely enough to travel to Yandu, but at this time Ying Ziheng said it only took 5 days. Ying Zheng met Ying Ziheng's calm gaze. Thinking of Ying Ziheng's miraculous ability to manipulate Huangsha, Ying Zheng still spoke up. Is 5 days enough? The voice was steady, but there was a hint of concern hidden within it. He was naturally willing to believe what Ying Ziheng said about the 5-day deadline, but he was also afraid that Ying Ziheng would be conceited and arrogant. A stubborn and arrogant young master also finds it difficult to govern the Great Qin. Faced with Ying Zheng's inquiry, Ying Ziheng smiled calmly. Under the heavenly power of the Great Qin dynasty, all sentient beings should avoid it. Before the glorious avenue of Daqin, all those who blocked it were just crab arms blocking the car. Upon hearing such an answer, Ying Zheng's long-awaited passion surged in his heart. In a daze, he felt as if he had returned to the time when he had set off his horse and set foot in the 6 kingdoms, with a great ambition to unify the world. Ying Zheng stood up with his hands down, and his majestic voice sounded. Okay. I'll give you 200,000 iron cavalry, within 5 days, break through the capital of Yen and retrieve the heads of the king of Yen and the crown prince Dan. 50,000. Ying Ziheng spoke out. Ying Zheng didn't come to his senses for a moment, and his gaze showed confusion. 50,000 iron cavalry is enough. Ying Ziheng is resolute and resolute. 50,000 yuan, even the slowest minister at this moment understood the absurdity behind it. 50,000 iron riders within 5 days, horses trampling on the capital of Yen. This statement is undoubtedly unfounded, but at this moment no one dares to refute it, because the person who said this was the 3rd prince of the Great Qin. It was Ying Ziheng who defeated a great master with one hand. However, even so, there are still people among the courtiers who want to speak out and dissuade. The war between the two countries often involves tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even more. Relying solely on countless soldiers to build up, even the strong of heaven and humanity find it difficult to escape. In the eyes of the courtiers, Ying Ziheng seemed to regard the national war as a battle in the martial arts world, only looking at the level of combat power. For a moment, the courtiers were all filled with regret in their hearts. This 3rd young master is ultimately young, and I only hope that in the future he can grow into a qualified young master of Qin. On the other hand, Li Si frowned slightly upon hearing the words, his gaze fixed on Ying Zheng, to see Ying Ziheng's arrogant attitude. However, what he saw was still Ying Ziheng calm and composed. 50,000 iron cavalry. At this moment, Zhao Gao's heart was already filled with joy. I tried my best to keep my emotions hidden from others, but my heart was overjoyed. In his view, Ying Ziheng was already boundless and rebellious, and under such a mentality, he was bound to die young. 50,000 is enough. Ying Ziheng confirmed the way. It seems that the courtiers are passionate at this moment and have nothing to do with him. 50,000 iron cavalry is needed to clear the city and guard the capital of Yen. If we only obtain the heads of the king of Yen and the crown prince Dan, why bother so much? As soon as a word was spoken, the Zhangtai palace fell into silence once again. Ying Zheng's figure trembled slightly, and his gaze gazed at Ying Ziheng. San Gongzi cannot do it. Meng Tian also spoke out, saying that all the things he had just heard were in his ears. And until now, hearing that Ying Ziheng only needed 50,000 iron cavalry for guarding the city, it was difficult to remain silent. The terrifying martial arts talent displayed by Ying Ziheng at this moment appears to him to be an unparalleled talent. In the future, we will surely achieve the goals of heaven and humanity, and even enter the legendary realm of land immortals. If he were trapped in the army of Yen due to Tuada, he would be ashamed for life for today's silence. Zhang Han, who was hiding beside him, also trembled with his gaze. At this moment, Ying Ziheng's domineering demeanor was completely different from his usual posture. At this moment, it seemed as if Zhang Han had just rediscovered Ying Ziheng, got to know this 3rd young master of the Great Qin again. In the Zhangtai palace, the courtiers looked at each other with mixed eyes, and most of them saw a few strands of pity in Ying Ziheng's eyes. To them, even a 3-year-old child wouldn't say what Ying Ziheng just said. At this moment, Ying Ziheng seemed like a madman, but they dared not speak up, just waiting quietly. Ying Zheng's gaze fell on Ying Ziheng, thinking of the various miracles that occurred when Ying Ziheng was born, thinking of the calm demeanor of Ying Ziheng covering his hands to kill the Grand Master. An inexplicable intuition arose in Ying Zheng's heart, and he immediately spoke up. Okay, I'll give you 50,000 iron cavalry. 5 days later. I want to see the heads of King Yan and Crown Prince Dan. Upon hearing the words, Ying Ziheng looked up and met Ying Zheng with his gaze, slightly nodding. My lord, take orders. As the word settled, a powerful force surged within Ying Ziheng's body, causing his mind to sink. Template. Azir, Desert Emperor, integration progress. 8% in an instant, Ying Ziheng's integration progress with Azir soared by 5%. Power is the best portrayal of an emperor. Chapter 10. Two emperors in the same heaven, shocking the world. Seeking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A typical tavern is filled with wine guests, and the aroma of wine is overflowing. And beneath this restaurant, in a secret room, a secret message falls through a slide. The black-robed man sitting in the secret room took the secret letter and unfolded it, his hand stiffening. A surprised expression appeared in both eyes. I saw a note written on it, Jing Ke assassinated King Qin. After a while, the black-robed man finally regained his senses, his expression heavy, and his fingerbones holding the note had turned white. Dong, dong dong with a few taps from the black-robed man, several figures entered outside the secret room. One of the pinnacle swordsmen in the world, the great master Jing Ke assassinated the king of Qin. On the brink of success or failure, bravely go to death. Starting from today, our disciples offer 3 days of condolences. As a few figures left, above the secret room, in the tavern, for a moment, the guests remained silent, devoid of the lively excitement they had just experienced. Some even beat their chests and feet, sobbing uncontrollably, cursing angrily. The injustice of the heavens makes it difficult for Qin to perish. This scene has been staged one after another among various countries. At this moment, in a mountain villa, several figures are singing to each other in a bamboo forest, drinking wine and drinking water, and the fragrance of wine is overflowing. Just as everyone was playing bamboo and singing loudly, a figure in a Confucian robe stumbled into the bamboo forest, and a piece of paper tightly held in his hand was already soaked in sweat. Mr. Zifeng. Mr. Zifeng. The Confucian disciple saw Zhang Liangzheng, who was in a drunken state, wanting to raise his wine cup and quickly ran to shout out. Zhang Liang took the note with one hand and his gaze fell on it. It is prominently written above that Ying Ziheng has mastered the power of natural disasters, killed the great master Jing Ke, and the plan to assassinate Qin has failed. Seeing this, Zhang Liang's pupils suddenly shrank. The initial drunkenness instantly dissipated, and a hint of anger gradually appeared in the eyes. At this moment, Zhang Liang felt an indescribable sadness in his heart. He clenched his palm and punched hard on the stone table, making a dull sound. Qin should be killed. Tyrants should be executed. What a magnificent feat is the king of assassination. Why is God not helping? Zhang Liang looked at the news of Jing Ke's death, and his eyes gradually became damp and hot. Drink a glass of liquor and howl in the sky. Rebellion of Qin is difficult. Rebellion of Qin is difficult. And deep in the villa, in a quiet room, Xuanzi, who was sitting still, also received a note. Xuanzi's gaze was deep and he looked out into the sky, feeling restless. In a daze, it seemed like seeing a bloody scene. I'm afraid there will be another war in this world. Bang, bang bang. After a knock on the door, a group of Confucian disciples entered the lobby of the villa. At this moment, there are already many Confucian disciples gathered in the lobby, including the 3 sages of the little sage Shuang and Sun Fuzi. However, the lobby was filled with sadness. Jing Ke stabbed Qin and bravely died. Many Confucian disciples are filled with sorrow, and their hearts are filled with curses against the tyrant for his long life, causing harm for thousands of years. A thoughtful person, looking at the news coming from outside, couldn't help but furrow their brows. Does that young Master Heng really have the supernatural ability to manipulate the yellow sand disaster? As soon as one word is spoken, the other Confucian disciples are all looking sideways. The Huangsha natural disaster was terrifying, and even the great master of Jing Ke's generation was killed by him. What exactly is the origin of the Huangsha natural disaster? Why is the power of natural disasters controlled by mortals? If that third young master of the Great Qin really masters the yellow sand disaster, we will encounter another major obstacle on our anti-Qin journey. For a moment, many Confucian disciples in the lobby were filled with melancholy. Absurdity. Zibuyu is a strange and chaotic person. The so-called yellow sand disaster is probably just a strange martial art. How can there be anyone in this world who can control the natural disaster by calling for wind and rain? Zhang Liang, who had been silent all along, angrily patted the table and stood up. Zhang Liang was the three masters of Confucianism, and as soon as he spoke, many Confucian disciples fell silent. After half a sound, a Confucian disciple nodded and said, "Indeed, Zibuyu is full of supernatural powers and terrifying natural disasters, such as nuclear energy being controlled by mortals." More and more Confucian disciples nodded and said yes, but Sun Fuzi sitting on it had a deep gaze and was speechless. Although he didn't want to believe those strange and chaotic theories, Sun Fuzi's gaze fell on the note in front of him. The Qin Gong Ziheng possesses the ability to control the natural disasters of Huangsha, annihilating a generation of great master Jing Ke with his hands covered. In just a few lines, it seemed like a heavy hammer hitting Xuanzi. Is it really just some kind of eerie martial arts? Sun Fuzi felt a palpitations in his heart, feeling that something was beyond his control. It's night, all sounds are still, under a starry sky facing the rolling mountains. Zaiyozi followed a carrier pigeon as it fell. Zaiyozi took down the creed and unfolded it, revealing that it was Jing Ke who had assassinated the king of Qin. After half a sound, the creed shattered into powder in Zaiyozi's hand and passed away with the wind. Zaiyozi's gaze was deep, gazing into the night, as her gaze flowed through the stars in the sky, as if to perform through the stars, this method of breaking through the chaos of the world. And while Zaiyozi was observing the stars, a young girl dressed in a Taoist robe seemed to come riding the wind. Noticing that Zaiyozi was observing the stars, he immediately remained silent and waited. Finally, after a gust of night breeze, Zaiyozi's figure moved slightly. This chaotic world is about to change again. The girl in the Taoist robe is unknown, so. Did something happen? Zaiyozi pondered for a moment, then looked up at the starry sky to which Qin belonged. There is an emperor star rising, shining brightly. The girl's doubts deepened this time. Isn't the emperor star of Qin always there? No. It's another emperor star. It's two imperial stars appearing together. Speaking of which, there was a hint of tremolo in Zaiyozi's calm voice. How could it be possible? The girl in the Taoist robe had a shocked expression on her face. Under the starry sky of Qin, two imperial stars shone brightly. In a field, a strong man dressed as a farmer wiped off his sweat and walked to the side under the shade of a tree to rest. However, not long after, he was awakened by a burst of noise. I saw several strong men dressed as farmers gathered around me. Hurry up, Xia Kuei's urgent move. The man who was about to rest had not yet realized it, so he was pulled and ran towards the core of the farmhouse. The Mahist institution city, with its serrated gears rotating in the deep pool of water, drives the murmuring stream. A group of Mahist children patrolled past, taking some stream water to wet their faces. Are you saying that young Master Heng really in control of the yellow sand disaster? One of the disciples of the Mahist school spoke out and asked. Who knows, but Jing Ke, who can suppress and kill the Grand Master, probably has indescribable strength. The news of Jing Ke assassinating Qin and Gong Ziheng controlling the natural disaster also spread to the Mahist organization city. For a moment, the defense of the mechanism city became even more tense. It seems like another storm is about to rise in this chaotic world. In the palace of the King of Yen, the King of Yen enjoyed sitting on the throne with a gloomy expression on his face. He knelt down and sat with a figure, who was undoubtedly the Crown Prince Dan. Faced with the rebuke from Prince Yen Shi, Crown Prince Dan remained silent. But his heart was filled with sadness, and Jing Ke was already the strongest swordsman he could find. If according to the plan, the King of Qin would have been executed by now, but he didn't want to kill the young master Heng halfway through. What have you really done? Yen Wangshi's voice trembled, and his tone was full of sadness and anger. How dare you? How dare you make someone assassinate the King of Qin? Prince Dan remained silent and allowed the King of Yen to scold him. After half a sound, Yen Wangshi finally calmed down. Now that the King of Qin is furious, our country of Yen is in dire straits. Aren't you allowing yourself to be cunning? Then tell me, how should Yen state handle itself? There was a hint of fatigue in the voice of King Yen Shi. Upon hearing this, Crown Prince Dan raised his head slightly, with a hint of contemplation in his gaze. There is a method of combining vertical and horizontal elements in the Ghost Valley Gate. The called harmony refers to the mutual vows of various countries to watch and help each other. Nowadays, the iron cavalry of the Great Qin is coming fiercely, making it difficult for our Yen country to resist, but if we can unite Qi and Chu, we may not necessarily lack the power of Ibo. The King of Yen exhaled a mouthful of turbid Qi, his heart filled with complexity. The state of Yen is weak and small, with powerful officials leading the way inside and powerful countries standing outside. Outsiders say he is incompetent, but when faced with the Qin iron cavalry, he is truly powerless to resist. It's not that he's unwilling to turn the tide, he's really powerless. Go ahead, as you said. In the voice of King Yan's joy, exhaustion grew even more severe. Yes. Prince Dan responded and turned around to leave. A gust of autumn wind blew by, and Prince Dan shuddered, feeling a chill in his heart. Ying Ziheng. Prince Dan paused every word, his tone filled with resentment.